Hello, my friends. In this video, we will be exploring polarization, which you've probably heard about and seen on the internet. This is not just a political issue, but actually a deeply human issue. And we'll explore how our media environments encourage us to see each other as enemies, how the internet strips away our social context, and how it becomes easy to imagine the absolute worst about human beings we've never actually met. This video mostly focuses on affective polarization, a psychological phenomenon where we dislike people simply for being on the other side, regardless of whatever they as individuals actually believe. So I want to start by getting really clear on something that's often conflated. So you hear, oh, we're more polarized than ever. It's so polarized. So let's get clear on what we actually mean when we say that. There are two types of polarization we'll discuss in this video. Ideological polarization. So ideological meaning about ideas is when people disagree about specific policies or beliefs. And then affective polarization is when we begin to dislike, distrust, or even flat out hate people who belong to a different group, even when we don't really understand or know what they actually believe. And this is where things get dangerous because it's not just about disagreement. It's about disgust and the way that the algorithms tend to fuel that hatred for the other side. I love to tell a story when I describe affective polarization um, about Mechanic Bob. So imagine you are a young person and you just got a car and you've been taking your car to get serviced by Mechanic Bob. And you go off to college and a couple years later you come back home and you bring the car back to Mechanic Bob and Mechanic Bob says something a little questionable. What are you going to do? Are you going to maybe ask him what he really meant, or just let it slide, or try to have a conversation? Are you going to be really angry and stop taking your car to Mechanic Bob? What are you going to do? You know Mechanic Bob. He's been helping his neighbors fix their cars for free for years. Now you see Mechanic Bob online. The first piece of information you're going to get about Mechanic Bob is the most horrible, outrageous thing Mechanic Bob has ever said, because that is what the algorithm will amplify and push to the top. So he'll be flattened into a villain, a stereotype. And the Mechanic Bob you knew from real life had social context and a family and good things about him, and he was a man of hard work and service. And so I tell this story to really illustrate the point of how the internet strips away social context. We don't see the full person, we just see their avatar. And now when we're looking at affective polarization, I want to get into the idea. And now let's look at the numbers. So from the 1970s to the 1990s, Americans rated their own political party around a 70 to 75 on a 0 to 100 warmth scale. So if I say I'm a Republican, I would rate other Republicans as a 70 to 75. I would rate Democrats or the opposing party around a 40. The same is true in reverse. By the 2010s, the number that people rated for the opposite party was a 10 out of 100. That's cold. We're no longer just disagreeing here. We are finding disdain and distrust in other people. And this growing perception gap makes it nearly impossible to find common ground. What the perception gap refers to is that our perception of the differences is actually much larger than the differences themselves. So, a study by More in Common found that Americans dramatically overestimate how extreme people on the other side are. So, for example, when people were asked, what percent of Republicans do you believe earn over $250,000? Or what percent of Democrats do you believe are members of a union? People from the opposite party would say something like 25%, 40%, when the actual numbers in both cases are somewhere between 2 and 10%. So this illustrates the gap in our perception. The same is true in perceived immigration positions. So if you ask Republicans what they perceive about Democrats' positions on immigration, they believe most Democrats want completely open borders. Same is true of Democrats' perceptions of Republicans. If you ask Democrats, what do Republicans want? Democrats will say Republicans want completely closed borders. But now, if we look at the actual positions, you can see that there's significant position overlap, presenting almost perfectly like a bell curve. But this is not the information that the algorithm amplifies and then shows you. It shows you the worst of the worst, the most extreme versions of both sides. And I'm applying this to politics here. I myself am not a particularly political person, but I apply this to politics because it's a really easy binary to study. So often when scientists are studying polarization, they use political polarization, but you could really apply this to any topic or issue and you'd find similar outcomes. One other thing that's important to name here is that there are people, politicians, influencers, media outlets, who benefit from our division. So if you've ever heard the story of red ants and black ants, if you put red ants and black ants together in a jar, they'll just separate and leave each other alone. But if you pick up the jar and shake it, the ants will begin fighting like crazy. And this is a large part of what our media environment does to create the perception gap, shakes the jar. And the people shaking the jar are called conflict entrepreneurs. So these are enterprises or people who profit financially, politically, or socially by stoking outrage and in-group favoritism. It's not beneficial for them for you to see or understand nuance. What's beneficial is blind rage because attention is powerful and outrage gets clicks. So I understand that I'm telling you some bad news, but the good news of this is that it's mostly our perception of the other side that is divided rather than our division between actual other human beings. So what can we do? We can go and begin talking to our actual neighbors. And instead of talking to them about the news, talk to them about their values, their beliefs. If they say something different about a media or news or political issue than you believe, try to ask questions to get to the core belief that's underneath there. And you might be surprised to find the core belief is something you might have in common. And the majority of people you disagree with or that disagree with you probably want the same basic things you do: safety, belonging, opportunity. So begin again, we're cultivating that practice of noticing. So continue to notice when you're online, when are you flattening someone into a label or a box or saying, oh, you are this kind of person and therefore you are bad? And yes, other people might be doing that to you also, but you can't control them. You can only control yourself. And if we want to build a more peaceful and loving world, we must become more peaceful and loving people. It's the only way. Pause when you feel triggered by a tweet or a comment. Put the phone away, let it go. You don't know that person, it's not your business. Practice curiosity. So whenever you're not actively enraged, then just get curious. What is it that I might not be seeing about this person's life or perspective? This polarization, specifically affective polarization, our disdain and distrust of other people, isn't just a problem of the media, it's a human story problem. And the truth is that we get to decide which stories we amplify. In our next video, we're going to look at misinformation, deepfakes, and AI, and what that means for our ability to trust anything at all. And between this video and the next, just start again the practice of noticing. What kinds of stories are you believing about the imagined other? What kinds of stories do you believe about the people right there in your real physical life? What kinds of stories do you believe about yourself? What happens when you make space for people to be the complex, beautiful beings that they are?